The Los Angeles Chargers season ended in one of the worst ways imaginable as they lost in the wildcard round of the playoffs to the Jacksonville Jaguars with a score of 31-30. A wildcard round loss isn't the worst thing in the world, but it was a very Chargers way in which they lost. They were up 27-0 in the first half and blew the third biggest lead in postseason history. And yes, it was a terrible loss for the Chargers, and yes, this game is gross in a lot of ways, and yes, this team in some ways is a train wreck at the moment, but this is a very, very fixable train wreck, and this isn't a one-game problem, and this video is not the result of one loss, one time, and there is a lot to dive into in today's video. The Chargers running the table as a 5 seed in the AFC was always going to be a difficult task. Some would say a near impossible task. And yes, Justin Herbert should have had his first career playoff win, and that will happen with time, but there are a lot of problems with this team. The good news is they are relatively easy to fix. This isn't a Chicago Bears rebuild number 1 overall pick situation, and a lot of the Chargers' difficulties are very Charger-like problems, as cliche as that sounds. They get in their own way a lot of the time, and they do not get close to maximizing what they can do, and it all starts with coaching. If you have had a conversation with a Chargers fan in the past 2 years, then I'm sure the frustration of coaching was expressed in one way or another. And it starts with Brandon Staley and eventually trickles down to offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi. Staley makes downright reckless decisions at times, and it's cost the Chargers more than it's helped them. And 2 big decisions come to mind since Staley took over as the head coach at the beginning of the 2021 season. The decision in Week 18 of the 2021 Raiders game, well, really 2 decisions, but at the end of the game to take a timeout and let the Raiders get in field goal position to make a game-winning field goal when a tie would have sent your team to the postseason and a loss would ultimately send you home. The game being played on Sunday night in front of a national audience obviously doesn't help Staley's reputation, but that was a brutal decision when the Raiders appeared to be going for a tie. And also, within that game, Staley opted to go for it on 4th down while not converting on his own 18-yard line. And I get being aggressive, but that was way out of line at that point in the game, given it was 17-14 in the third quarter with 8 minutes left. This wasn't a, we're down 21 points in the fourth and we have to go for it to keep the small percent chance of us winning alive. And another big decision by Staley came about a year later, when he decided to play his starters in a meaningless Week 18 game against the Broncos, and receiver Mike Williams got hurt in this game. Williams ended up missing the wild card game in Jacksonville, and I don't want to get into a conversation of, well, if Mike Williams plays, the Chargers don't blow a 27-point lead and they win, because that's a huge leap and a big what if. But what I will say is having him in this game certainly would have helped. And being a head coach at the NFL level is about maximizing what your players can do. If you want to see a perfect example of maximizing what a team can do, look no further than the New York Giants and what Brian Daboll has done in 1 year. The talent on these rosters, the Giants and Chargers that is a considerable difference, yet one is going to the divisional round of the playoffs, and the other is a wild card exit with the 3rd largest blown lead in postseason history. And not only is being a head coach at the NFL level about maximizing what your players can do, it's also about the in-game decisions, and there are a lot of questions with Staley regarding the in-game decisions. But he is not the only problem on the coaching staff, and we dove into this a couple of weeks ago, and we will dive into this again. But one of the Chargers' biggest offseason needs is to acquire a receiver that can stretch the defense. It doesn't matter who it is as long as they can simply stretch the defense. And I think a perfect player for this team would be somebody like Darius Slayton, who is currently on the Giants and who is currently slated to be a free agent at the end of the year. It doesn't have to be him specifically as long as it's somebody that the defense has to account for. and the Chargers not having a legitimate deep threat plays into them being a fixable train wreck. Justin Herbert is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Sure, he's probably not in your top 3 or maybe 4 quarterbacks, but from a talent standpoint and what he can do with the ball in his hands is insane, and there are countless NFL franchises that wish they had Herbert. He finished 23rd in the NFL in passing yards per attempt, which means they did not successfully push the ball down the field as much as other NFL teams. For reference, Patrick Mahomes finished 2nd in this stat, Josh Allen finished 7th, and Joe Burrow finished 10th. And what's even more frustrating when you dive in a little further, it's not that the Chargers weren't trying to get the ball downfield, as Justin finished 4th in the NFL in passes thrown 20 plus yards from the line of scrimmage, behind only Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, and Russell Wilson. But Justin's completion percentage in passes thrown 20 plus yards from the line of scrimmage ranked 28th at 34.2%. And what a lot of teams end up doing against the Chargers, because they don't have a receiver that can run under a 4.5 40 on their team, is they keep everything in front of them and they don't have to worry about getting beat deep, because more often than not, it's going to take a highlight reel type catch by Mike Williams or a player to find a big gap in zone coverage. And this is why I think the Chargers, in a lot of ways, were doomed from the start once the postseason was underway. It's not that I don't trust Justin Herbert or don't think he has the talent, it's that the personnel is not there. This goes back to both coaching and, in general manager Tom Telesco's case, not acquiring players that would help your team in a big way. When you watch the New York Giants, Brian Daboll plays to his guys' strengths, and Darius Slayton is a tall and fast receiver. So what does he do? He has Darius Slayton run a lot of deep crossing routes, which are very difficult to defend to begin with, because a corner has to go stride for stride and then defend a pass while fully on the run with a player that, in Slayton's case, is a 6'1" receiver who ran a 4.39 40 in his pre-draft process. And when Slayton is on the field for the Giants, I'm not saying defenses are scared shitless of Darius, but they always account for him because of his top-end speed, which in turn helps running back Saquon Barkley, because defenses can't put that much emphasis on stopping Saquon, because if they do, Darius will get the ball on a deep cross and burn them for 25 to 30 yards. But the Chargers have nobody like that, and it doesn't help Keenan Allen was already a slower receiver who is now 30 years old. And sure, the Giants are probably not going to win a Super Bowl this year, but it's the point of what they are doing from a coaching standpoint. And there's one player that would help the Chargers out this offseason that would address this problem in a big way. Not necessarily fix the problem, but it would be a huge step in the right direction without using a high draft pick, is of course the aforementioned Slayton, and if that doesn't work out, then soon to be free agent Mecole Hardman. Mecole Hardman is a Chiefs receiver who is a former second round pick, and if there is one big thing about Mecole's game, it's speed. This doesn't mean he's going to go to LA and become a 1,000-yard receiver because he can catch the deep ball, but what it does mean is he can go to LA, be a field stretcher at minimum, and keep the defense honest at all times. Per PFF, Justin Herbert was second in the NFL in 2022 with passing attempts going from right at the line of scrimmage to 9 yards past the line of scrimmage, otherwise classified as short throws, and he threw 339 of these passes, which was second to only Tom Brady, who had offensive line issues all year. And yes, a lot of them were checkdowns to Austin Eckler, but not all of them were. Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator, would call a ton of stick concepts and have receivers back to the end zone, meaning it is near impossible for a receiver to catch the ball, turn, then make a move or two to get upfield and break off a big play after the catch. And limiting Herbert the way the Chargers did this year all plays into them being a fixable train wreck. It should have never got to this point with Justin Herbert, the all-time leader in passing yards through 3 years of any NFL player's career, but now that it has, it's time to get it back on track and get the Chargers into a position where they can go try and win a Super Bowl. Lost within the 2022 Chargers season is how bad they were at running the football. Yes, losing Rashawn Slater for most of the year can have some impact on this, as he played in only 3 games in 2022 after being a Pro Bowler as a rookie in 2021. but the Chargers finished 30th in rushing yards as a team this year and 30th in yards per carry. And yes, Austin Eckler had 107 receptions this year, but do you know what he did when running the ball out of the backfield? He had 2 100-yard games all year, and they were games in which he averaged 10.8 yards per carry, and in a game where he averaged 12.2 yards per carry. There were 11 games this year where Eckler averaged less than 4 yards per carry, and the Chargers need consistency back there. That's also different than saying Eckler is a bad player, because I am not saying that. But what I am saying is both the offensive line needs to perform better, and they need a running back to consistently get 4 or 5 yards per carry, not have an occasional 25-yard breakaway run followed by 6 attempts with a combined 8 yards. Unlike a lot of other teams, and hell, some teams we're going to discuss in depth on the channel coming up, you don't wonder about the future of the Chargers like you do with other NFL teams, and even for Brandon Staley for that matter. The defensive guys believe in him, which is more than you can say about a lot of other teams. I mean, Derwin James and Joey Bosa love the guy, which counts for something. And Joey Bosa was quoted recently that, quote, "I really do trust these coaches. It takes time to build something, and it's been 2 years. He's a fresh coach, and to expect him to know everything right away is kind of silly," end quote. But the Los Angeles Chargers are right there. I do think Brandon Staley will improve with time, as he will be a third-year coach next year and has a winning record with the Chargers. Yes, they've had some very Charger things happen to them. Yes, they blew a 27-point lead in the postseason. But with a couple of fixes in the next few months that are all very realistic, by the way, there is no reason this team cannot consistently be a 12-13 win team and go toe-to-toe with anybody. Hell, they give the Chiefs an absolute dogfight every time they play them, and that's not going to change. And the Chargers are a couple of fixes away from being a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.